Huainanzi chapter 7. Of old, in the time before there was heaven and earth, there were only images and no forms. All was obscure and dark, vague and unclear, shapeless and formless, and no one knows its gateway. There were two spirits, born in murkiness, one that established heaven and the other that constructed earth. So vast. No one knows where they ultimately end. So broad. No one knows where they finally stop. Thereupon they differentiated into the yin and the yang and separated into the 8 cardinal directions. The firm and the yielding formed each other, the myriad things thereupon took shape. The turbid vital energy became creatures, the refined vital energy became humans. Therefore, the quintessential spirit is of heaven, the skeletal system is of earth. When the quintessential spirit enters its gateway and the skeletal system returns to its root, how can I still survive? For this reason, the sages model themselves on heaven, accord with their genuine responses, are not confined by custom, or seduced by other men. They take heaven as father, earth as mother, yin and yang as warp, the 4 seasons as weft. Through the tranquility of heaven, they become pure. Through the stability of earth, they become calm. Among the myriad things, those who lose this perish, those who follow this live. 7/54/25, 7/55/2 Tranquility and stillness are the dwellings of spirit, like illumination, emptiness and nothingness are where the way resides. For this reason, those who seek for it externally lose it internally, those who preserve it internally attain it externally as well. It is like the roots and branches of trees, none of the thousands of limbs and tens of thousands of leaves does not derive from the roots. 7/55/457.2 The quintessential spirit is what we receive from heaven, the physical body is what we are given by earth. Therefore it is said, the one generates the two generate the three generate the myriad things. The myriad things carry the yin and embrace the yang and, through the blending of vital energy, become harmonious. 1 Therefore it is said, in the first month, fertilization occurs. In the second month, a corporeal mass develops. In the third month, an embryo forms. In the fourth month, the flesh is produced. In the fifth month, the muscles form. In the sixth month, the bones develop. In the seventh month, the fetus forms. In the 8th month, the fetus starts to move. In the 9th month, its movements become more pronounced. In the 10th month, the birth occurs. In this way, the physical body is completed and the 5 orbs are formed. Therefore, the pulmonary orb 2 regulates the eyes, the renal orb regulates the nose, the choleric orb regulates the mouth, the hepatic orb regulates the ears, and the splenic orb regulates the tongue. The external ones are on the outer side, the internal ones are on the inner side. They open and close, expand and contract, and each has its conduits and connections. Therefore, the roundness of the head is in the image of heaven, the squareness of human feet is in the image of earth. 3 Heaven has 4 seasons, 5 phases, 9 regions, and 366 days. Humans have 4 limbs, 5 orbs, 9 apertures, and 366 joints. Heaven has wind, rain, cold, and heat. Humans have taking, giving, joy, and anger. Therefore, the choleric orb parallels for the clouds, the pulmonary orb parallels the air, the hepatic orb parallels the wind, the renal orb parallels the rain, and the splenic orb parallels the thunder. In this way human beings form a triad with heaven and earth, and the mind is the ruler of this. Therefore, the ears and eyes are the sun and moon, the blood and vital energy are the wind and rain. In the sun there is a 3-legged crow, in the moon there is a speckled toad. 5 When sun and moon err in their periodic motions, fireflies have no light, wind and rain are not appropriate to the season, and destruction occurs and disasters arise. When the 5 asterisms err in their periodic movements, provinces and states meet with calamity. 7/55/7, 16:7.3 The way of heaven and earth is immense and grand, yet it still must restrict its brilliance and conserve its spirit-like illumination. The ears and eyes of human beings, how can one expect them to toil for long periods without rest? The quintessential spirit, how can one expect it to course through the body for long periods without respite? Therefore, the blood and vital energy are the flowerings of humankind, and the five orbs are the essence of humankind. If the blood and vital energy are concentrated within the five orbs and the quintessential spirit does not flow out, then the chest and belly are replete and lusts and desires are eliminated. When the chest and belly are replete and lusts and desires are eliminated, then the ears and eyes are clear, and hearing and vision are acute. When the ears and eyes are clear and hearing and vision are acute, we call this clarity. When the five orbs can be subordinated to the mind and their functioning is without error, then fluctuating attention will be done away with, and the circulation of the vital energy will not be awry. When fluctuating attention is done away with and the circulation is not awry, then the quintessential spirit is abundant, and the vital energy is not dispersed. When the quintessential spirit is abundant and the vital energy is not dispersed, then you are functioning according to underlying patterns. When you function according to underlying patterns, you attain equanimity. When you attain equanimity, you develop penetrating awareness. When you develop penetrating awareness, you become spirit-like. When you are spirit-like, with vision, there is nothing unseen, with hearing, there is nothing unheard, with actions, there is nothing incomplete. For this reason, anxiety and worry cannot enter, and aberrant vital energy cannot seep in. 7/55/18, 24 Thus there are certain things that you seek outside the four seas yet never meet and others that you guard within the physical frame yet never see. Therefore, the more you seek, the less you attain, the more you see, the less you understand. 7/55/26, 27 7.4 The apertures of perception eyes and ears are the portals of the quintessential spirit. The vital energy and attention are the emissaries and servants of the five orbs. When the eyes and ears are enticed by the joys of sound and color, then the five orbs oscillate and are not stable. When the five orbs oscillate and are not stable, then the blood and vital energy are agitated and not at rest. When the blood and vital energy are agitated and not at rest, then the quintessential spirit courses out through the eyes and ears and is not preserved. When the quintessential spirit courses out and is not preserved, then when either good fortune or misfortune arrives, although it be the size of hills and mountains, one has no way to recognize it. But if you make your ears and eyes totally clear and profoundly penetrating and not enticed by external things, if your vital energy and attention are empty, tranquil, still, and serene and you eliminate lusts and desires, if the five orbs are stable, reposed, replete, and full and not leaking the vital energies, if your quintessential spirit is preserved within your physical frame and does not flow out, then even gazing back beyond bygone ages and looking further than things that are to come, even these things would not be worth doing. Much less discriminating between bad and good fortune. Therefore it is said, the farther you go, the less you know. 6. This says that the quintessential spirit cannot be allowed to be enticed by external things. Therefore, the five colors disrupt the eyes and cause them to be unclear, the five sounds confuse the ears and cause them to not be acute, the five tastes disrupt the mouth and cause it to lose the ability to taste, preferences confuse the nature and cause it to fly about from one thing to the next. 7. These four things are how the people of this world commonly nourish their natures. However, they all are human attachments. Therefore it is said, lusts and desires cause humans' vital energy to dissipate, likes and dislikes cause human minds to tire. If you do not quickly eliminate them, your attention and vital energy will diminish daily. 7/55/27, 7/56/8 7.5 Why is it that common people are not able to complete the full course of their lives and, along the way, die young by execution? It is because they set too much store in living. Now only those who are able to not make living their concern are able to attain long life. 8. Heaven and earth revolve and interpenetrate, the myriad things bustle about yet form a unity. If one is able to know this unity, then there is nothing that cannot be known. If one cannot know this unity, then there is not even one thing that can truly be known. For example, I live within the world, yet I am also a thing in it. I do not know whether the things of the world are complete because of me or whether only without me are things not incomplete. However, I am also a thing and things relate to things. 9. A thing is related to other things by this underlying unity, so why must we be things to, i.e., objectify one another? Even though this may be so, what gain is there in its giving me life, what loss is there in its taking my life away? Because what fashions and transforms us treats me as an unfired brick, I have no way to defy it. 10. How do I know that to practice acupuncture and moxibustion and to desire life is not a delusion and to seek death by strangulation is not a blessing? Perhaps life is just servitude, and death is a respite from this toil. 11. The world is vast, who understands it? It gives me life, but not because I intentionally seek it. It takes my life away, but not because I intentionally seek an end. Desire life, but do not strive for it. Detest death, but do not refuse it. Demean it, but do not detest it. Honor it, but do not rejoice in it. Follow your heavenly endowment and be at peace until you develop it to the fullest. In life I have a form that is 7 feet tall, 12 in death I have the space of a coffin's worth of soil. My life classes me with the things that have form, my death sinks me into the oblivion of the formless. Thus, because of my life, a thing is not added to the multitude, because of my death, the soil does not get any thicker. So how can I know what is pleasant or hateful, beneficial or harmful in all of this? 7/56/10, 20 The way in which what fashions and transforms us takes hold of things can be compared with the way in which the potter molds his clay. The earth that he has taken hold of and made into bowls and pots is no different from the earth before it had been taken from the ground. The earth that remains after he has made the vessels and then smashed them to pieces and thoroughly soaked them with water so that they return to their cause is no different from the earth that had been in the bowls and pots that had existed earlier. Now the people who live along the banks of a river draw water from it to irrigate their gardens, but the water in the river does not resent it. The families who live near filthy ponds break through their banks and drain them into the river, but the water from these ponds does not rejoice in this. Thus there is no difference between the water in the river and the water irrigating gardens, and there also is no difference between the water in the ponds and the water in the river. Thus sages adapt to the times and are at peace with their station in life, they conform to their age and so find happiness in their calling. 7/56/22, 26 7.6 Sadness and joy are aberrations of potency, pleasure and anger are excesses of the way, fondness and resentment are the fetters of the mind. 13 Therefore it is said that sages, in their life, act in accord with heaven, in their death, transform with other things. In tranquility, share the potency of the yin, in activity, share the surge of the yang. 14 Being calm and limitless, their quintessential spirit is not dissipated amid external things, and the world naturally submits to them. Thus, the mind is the ruler of the physical form, the spirit is the treasure of the mind. When the physical form toils without rest, it becomes exhausted, when the quintessence is used unceasingly, it runs out. 15 Thus sages honor and esteem it and do not dare to allow it to seep out. 7/56/28, 7/57/3 The owner of the jade half-disc of the Xiahe clan stores it in a strong box because it is supremely precious. 16 The preciousness of the quintessential spirit is not merely that of the jade half-disc of the Xiahe clan. For this reason, sages based in nothing respond to something and invariably fathom the underlying patterns, based in the empty accept the full, and invariably fathom the temporal nodes. 17 Calm and still, empty and tranquil, by this they reach the end of their lifespans. Thus, there is nothing from which they are too aloof, nothing with which they are too intimate. Embracing the potency and blending with the harmonious, they accord with heaven. They make the way their boundary and potency their neighbor. They do not make attaining good fortune a priority, they do not make avoiding misfortune an antecedent. 18. Their ethereal and corporeal souls are settled in their dwelling. 19. Their quintessence and spirit are preserved in their root. Death and life do not alter them. Therefore we say they are supremely spirit-like. 7/57/5, 97.7 Those whom we call the perfected are people whose inborn nature is merged with the way. Therefore, they possess it but appear to have nothing. They are full but appear to be empty. They are settled in this unity and do not know of any duality. They cultivate what is inside and pay no attention to what is outside. They illuminate and clarify grand simplicity, taking no action, they revert to the unhuman. 20. They embody the foundation and embrace the spirit in order to roam freely within the confines of heaven and earth. 21. Untrammeled, they ramble outside this dusty world and wander aimlessly in their taskless calling. 22. Unfettered and unhindered, they harbor no clever devices or cunning knowledge in their minds. Thus death and life are great indeed, but they do not alter them. Although heaven and earth support and nourish, they are not protected by them. They discern the flawless and do not get mixed up with things. While seeing the chaos of affairs, they are able to preserve their origin. 23. Beings like these negate obsession and fear and cast aside sensory perceptions. 24. Their mental activity is concentrated internally and penetrates through to comport with the One. At rest, they have no objectives. In motion, they set no goals. Artlessly they go forth, peacefully they come back. Their bodies are like withered wood, their minds are like dead ashes. 25. They forget the five orbs, lose their physical frames, know without studying, see without looking, complete without acting, and differentiate without judging. When stimulated, they respond, when pressed, they move, when it is unavoidable, they go forth. 26. Like the brilliant glow of a flame, like the mimicry of a shadow. Taking the way as their guiding thread, they are necessarily so. Embracing the foundation of grand purity, they contain nothing. 27. And things cannot disturb them. Vast and empty, they are tranquil and without worry. Great marshes may catch fire, but it cannot burn them. Great rivers may freeze over, but it cannot chill them. Great thunder may shake the mountains, but it cannot startle them. 28. Great storms may darken the sun, but it cannot harm them. For this reason, they view precious pearls and jade as being the same as gravel. They view the supremely exalted and maximally favored at court as being the same as wandering guest scholars. They view the beauties Maojiang and Shishi 29 as being the same as funerary figurines. They take life and death to be a single transformation and the myriad things to be a single whole. They merge their vital essence with the root of great purity and roam freely beyond the boundless. They have vital essence but do not recklessly expend it, and have spirit but do not thoughtlessly use it. They identify with the artlessness of the great unhewn and take their stand amid the supremely pure. Thus, their sleep is dreamless. 30. Their wisdom is traceless. Their corporeal soul does not sink, their ethereal soul does not soar. 31. They repeatedly cycle from end to beginning, and we cannot know their starting and stopping points. They behold the dwelling place of total darkness and contemplate the lodging place of total brightness. They rest in the realms of the unfettered and roam in the fields of the nebulous. At rest, they have no appearance. In place, they have no location. In movement, they have no form. In stillness, they have no body. They are present yet seem to be absent. They are alive yet seem to be dead. They emerge from, and enter into, the dimensionless 32 and employ ghostly spirits as their servants. They plunge into the fathomless and enter the non-existent. 33. In order that their different forms evolve into one another, ending and beginning like a circle, of which no one can trace an outline. This is how their quintessential spirit is able to verge upon the way, this is the roaming of the perfected. 34/7/57/10, 7/58/37.8. If you huff and puff, exhale and inhale, blow out the old and pull in the new, practice the bear hang, the bird stretch, the duck splash, the ape leap, the owl gaze, and the tiger stare. This is what is practiced by those who nurture the body. 35. They are not the practices of those who polish the mind. Example, the perfected. They make their spirit overflow, without losing its fullness. When, day and night, without injury, they bring the spring to external things. 36. They unite with, and give birth to, the seasons in their own minds. Moreover, there are those who mortify their bodies without harming their minds, and those who seed their dwelling, i.e., the mind, without diminishing their quintessence. The thinking of the leper is not altered. 37. The body of the madman not impaired. But when their spirits eventually make their far-off journey, who will have time to think about what they did in their lives? Thus, even though the body disappears, the spirit is never transformed. If you use what does not transform in response to transformations, even through 1,000 alterations and 10,000 evolutions, you will not have begun to reach a limit. What transforms returns to the formless, what does not transform is born together with heaven and earth. A tree dies because its greenness has departed. But can that which gives life to a tree be a tree itself? Analogously, what fills the body is not the body. Thus, what gives birth to the living never dies. 38. Yet that to which it gives birth does die. What transforms things never transforms, yet that which it transforms does transform. If you take the world lightly, then your spirit will have no attachments. If you minimize the myriad things, then your mind will not be led astray. If you equalize death and life, then your mentality will not be fearful. If you take all alterations and transformations as being the same, then your clarity will not be darkened. The masses take these as empty words, but I take them as my ideal and prove them true. 7/58/3, 10:7.9. The reason people find pleasure in ruling is that they can fulfill the desires of their senses and facilitate the ease of their bodies. Nowadays, people find tall towers and lofty pavilions beautiful, but Yao did not trim the bark off the rough timber beams of his house and did not adorn the columns with capitals. People find strange rarities and unusual tastes attractive, but Yao ate coarse millet and a simple vegetable soup. People find elaborate embroidery and white fox fur pleasing, but Yao clothed himself in plain garments and deer pelts to ward off the cold. His practice of nourishing his nature was to not overlay it by adding great responsibilities and burdening it with grief. Thus his transmitting the world to shun was like the releasing of a burden from his back. This was not merely a polite offer, he really had no interest in ruling. This was the result of his taking the world lightly. Yu traveled south to inspect the region and was crossing a river when a yellow dragon picked up his boat on its back. 5 other people in the boat were so frightened that their faces kept altering color, but Yu laughed heartily and announced, "I received the mandate from heaven. I have exerted all my effort and toiled on behalf of the myriad people. Life is a sojourn, death is a return. How could this disturb my harmony?" He looked upon the dragon as if it were a lizard, so he was unafraid and his color did not change. The dragon thereupon hung his ears, picked up his tail, and fled. Yu's way of regarding serious things was to take them lightly, indeed. A spirit-like shaman from Zhen checked the physiognomy of Huainan, saw the signs of a short lifespan, and informed Lizzie. 39. Lizzie ran crying to report this to his teacher. Huainan, balancing heaven and earth, remained indifferent to the idea and the reality of it and allowed the dynamism of the breath to rise up from his heels. 40. From Huai's viewpoint, life and death were indeed equal. Ziqiu had lived for 54 years when an injury made him hunchbacked. 41. The arch of his spine was higher than his forehead, his chin pressed down on his chest, his 2 buttocks were on top, his rectum pointed to the sky. He crawled over to peer at himself in a well. Amazing. That which fashions and transforms us? How has it turned me into this crumpled thing? This shows that from his viewpoint, alterations and transformation are the same. Thus, if we examine the way of Yao, we thereupon know how light the world is. If we observe the mentality of Yu, we thereupon know how insubstantial the world is. If we get to the source of Yu's teaching, we thereupon know how equivalent death and life are. If we see the actions of Zikiu, we thereupon know how identical alterations and transformations are. 7/58/12, 23 7.10 The perfected lean on the unbudgeable pillar, walk on the unblocked road, draw from the inexhaustible storehouse, and study with the undying teacher. There is nowhere they go that they do not go all the way. There is nowhere they get to that they do not push on through. Living is not sufficient to preoccupy their thinking. Dying is not sufficient to occlude their spirit. Crouching and stretching, looking up and down, they embrace their lifespan and delight in its revolutions. Bad and good fortune, profit and loss, 1,000 alterations and myriad turns, which of these is sufficient to disturb their minds? People like them embrace simplicity, guard essence, like locusts molting and snakes shedding their skin they leave this world and, they wander in vast clarity. They lightly rise up and wander alone and suddenly enter the obscure. Even the phoenix cannot be their match, how much less the barn swallow. Power and station, rank and reward, how could these be sufficient to perturb their mentality? 7/58/25, 29 7.11 When Yanzi was offered a covenant by Kui Shu, even though he was facing death, he would not change his sense of rightness. 42 Ji and Hua 43 were going to fight to the death, and the Lord of Ju offered them a large sum of money to stop, but they would not change their conduct. Thus, Yanzi could be moved by humaneness but could not be threatened by force of arms. Ji and Hua could be halted by rightness but could not be bound up by profit. The superior man will die for what is right but cannot be made to pay attention to wealth and honor, will do what is right but cannot be made to fear threats of death. People like them act only according to what is right and are not drawn to material things. How much more is this so for those who act through non-action? Yao did not regard possessing the world as valuable, and thus he was able to hand it down to Shun. Gongzija 44 did not regard possessing a state as honorable, and thus he ceded his position. Zihan 45 did not regard jade as wealth, and thus he would not receive precious objects. Wu Guan 46 did not regard life as worth retaining through forsaking rightness, and thus he threw himself into the deep. From this perspective, supreme honor does not depend on a title, supreme wealth does not depend on goods. The world is supremely great, yet it can be given to others. Yourself is very dear, but it can be thrown away in the deep. Other than these things, there is nothing else worthy of considering beneficial. It is people like them whom we call without attachments. People without attachments do not value the world. Above, when they contemplate the discourses of the perfected, they profoundly trace to the origin the meaning of the way and its potency. Below, when they examine the customary practices of the age, they find them shameful. Thus if we comprehend the significance of Suyu, the metal-bound coffer and the leopard skin quiver will be set aside. 47 Jitsi of Yanling would not accept the rulership of the state of Wu, and as a result, people who pursued land boundary lawsuits dropped them. 48 Zihan was not interested in a precious jade, and as a result, people who disputed contracts were ashamed. Wu Guan was not corrupted by the attractions of his age, and those who lusted for profit more than life itself were filled with unease. Thus, those who do not contemplate the great meaning do not understand that life is not worth coveting. Those who have not listened to the great words do not understand that the empire is not worth valuing. Nowadays in impoverished rural villages, people bang on pots, drum on jars, and sing together, and they take this to be their music. But when they first hear the rhythmic striking of great ceremonial drums and the ringing of the great ceremonial bells, they suddenly feel disappointed and think their pots and jars are shameful. To collect the odes and the documents, to cultivate literary studies and yet not know the meaning of the utmost discourse like the Confucians is like those who bang on pots and drum on jars. To not strive to obtain the empire is the great drum of study. Honor, position, riches, and profit are what people covet. But tell someone to hold in his left hand a writ for the empire and with his right hand to cut his own throat, and not even a fool would take the latter. From this perspective, life is more valuable than empire. 7/59/1, 16:7.12 Sages eat enough to maintain their vital energy and wear clothes sufficient to cover their bodies. They satisfy their genuine responses and do not look for more. To not possess the empire does not diminish their natures, to possess the empire does not add to their inner harmony. Possessing and not possessing the empire are the same reality to them. If you offer someone the entire granary on Mount Ao or give them all the water in a river, were they to eat enough to sate their hunger and drink enough to quench their thirst, what would enter their bellies would not exceed a plate of food or a ladle of drink. So their bodies would be satisfied, and yet the granary on Mount Ao would not be diminished, their stomachs would be full, and yet their waters in the river would not be lessened. To own these great supplies would not make their satiation any greater, and to not own them would not make their hunger any worse. When we compare this with someone who has his bamboo jars of grain and his own small well, it is the same reality. When someone is extremely angry, it shatters his yin energy, and when someone is extremely happy, it collapses his yang energy. Great sorrow destroys his interior, and great fear drives him mad. Yet if you eschew the dust of daily living and relinquish attachments, you will be as calm as if you had never left your ancestor and thereupon will become grandly pervasive. 49 Purify your eyes and do not look with them, still your ears and do not listen with them, close your mouth and do not speak with it, relax your mind and do not think with it. Cast aside clever brilliance and return to vast simplicity, rest your quintessential spirit and cast aside wisdom and precedent. 50 Then, you will be awakened but seem to be obscured, you will be alive but seem to be dead. In the end, you will return to the foundation of the time before your birth and form one body with transformations. Then, to you, death and life will be one body. 7/59/16, 23 7.13 Now take the example of corvée laborers. They work with shovels and hoes and carry dirt in baskets on their backs until the sweat pours off them and their breathing becomes halting and their throats dry. If they are able to rest for a while beneath a shady tree, they will become relaxed and happy. Yet the profound shade deep within a mountain cave is incomparably better than that found beneath this shady tree. Take the example of people afflicted with intestinal tumors. They pound their chests, scrunch up their stomachs, hit their heads on their knees, curl up into a ball, and moan all night long without being able to sleep. During this time, if they can get even a moment's rest, then their parents and brothers will be pleased and happy. Yet the repose of a long night's sleep is incomparably better than this momentary joy. Thus, if you know the immensity of the cosmos, you will not be concerned about life and death. If you know the harmony of nourishing vitality, you will not be attached to the world. If you know the happiness of not yet being born, you will not be afraid of dying. If you know that to be Suyu is more valuable than Shun, you will not covet things. A standing wall is better once it topples, how much better if it had never been built. Ice is better once it melts, how much better if it had never been frozen. 51 From nothing treading into something, from something treading into nothing, from beginning to end there are no traces, and no one knows from whence it springs. Without penetrating the exteriority and the interiority of the way, who is able to be without likes and dislikes? The exterior that has no exterior, that is supremely grand. The interior that has no interior, that is supremely precious. 52 If you are able to know the grand and the precious, where will you go and not reach the end? 53 7/59/25, 7/60/4 7.14 Shallow scholars in this declining age do not understand how to get to the origins of their minds and return to their root. They merely sculpt and polish their natures and adorn and stifle their genuine responses in order to interact with their age. Thus, when their eyes desire something, they forbid it with measures; when their minds delight in something, they restrict it with rites. They hasten forth in circles and formally scrape and bow while the meat goes bad and becomes inedible and the wine goes sour and becomes undrinkable. Externally they restrict their bodies, internally they belabor their minds. They damage the harmony of yin and yang and constrain the genuine responses of their nature to fate. Thus throughout their lives, they are sorrowful people. Those who penetrate through to the way are not like this. They regulate the genuine responses of their natures, cultivate the techniques of the mind, nourish these with harmony, take hold of these through suitability. They delight in the way and forget what is lowly, they find repose in potency and forget what is base. Since their natures desire nothing, they attain whatever they desire. Since their minds delight in nothing, there are no delights in which they do not partake. Those who do not exceed their genuine responses do not allow them to tie down their potency. Those who find ease in their natures do not allow them to injure their inner harmony. Thus with their relaxed bodies and untrammeled awareness, their standards and regulations, they can become models for the empire. 7/60/6, 11:7.15 Nowadays the Confucian literati do not get to the foundations of why they have desires but instead prohibit what they desire, do not get to the source of why they delight in things but instead restrict what they enjoy. This is like breaking open the source of rivers and streams and then damming them up with your hands. Shepherding the people is like taking care of wild beasts. If you do not lock them up in enclosed pens, they will have savage hearts, but if you bind up their feet in order to prohibit their movement and still wish to raise them through a long life, how is this possible? Now Yanhui, Jilu, Zixia, and Ranbonia were Confucius's most brilliant students. 54 Still, Yan Yuan died young, Jilu was pickled in whey, Zixia lost his eyesight, and Ranbonia became a leper. These disciples all constrained their natures and stifled their genuine responses and did not attain harmony in their lives. Thus when Zixia met Zhenzi, 55 sometimes he was thin and sometimes he was fat. Zhenzi asked him the reason for this. Zixia replied, "When I went out and saw the delights of wealth and honor, I desired them. But when I returned and saw the way of the former kings and took pleasure in that, the two feelings fought each other in my mind, and I became thin. But when the way of the former kings won out, I got fat." Based on this, it is not that his will was able to not covet positions of wealth and honor and not appreciate the delights of excess, it was merely that by constraining his nature and restricting his desires that he used rightness to guard against them. Although their emotions and minds were depressed and gloomy and their bodies and natures were constricted and exhausted, they, i.e., the individuals just named, had no choice but to force themselves to follow the Confucian way. Thus none was able to live out his allotted years. Contrast these with the perfected: they eat exactly what suits their bellies, they wear precisely what fits their forms. They roam by relaxing their bodies. They act by matching their genuine responses to the situation. If left the empire, they do not covet it; if entrusted with the myriad things, they do not profit from it. They rest in the vast universe, roam in the country of the limitless, ascend Taiwan, and ride Tai. 56 They play with heaven and earth in the palms of their hands. How is it possible that people like them would grow fat or thin by coveting wealth? Thus, because the Confucians are unable to prevent people from desiring, they can only try to stop them from being fulfilled. Because they are unable to prevent people from delighting in things, they can only try to forbid those delights. They cause the world to fear punishments and not dare to steal, but how can they cause people not to have the intention to steal? 7/60/13, 23 7.16 When the people of you catch a python, they take it to be quite a valuable rarity, but when the people of the Middle Kingdom get hold of one, they discard it as useless. Thus, if he knew something was useless, even a greedy person would be able to give it away. If he did not know something was useless, even an incorruptible person would not be able to relinquish it to someone else. Now, the reason that rulers of people ruin and destroy their states and families, abandon and renounce their altars to the soil and grain, lose their lives at the hands of others, and become the laughing stocks of the world is that they have never not acted selfishly and not desired for themselves. The Qiuyu tribe coveted the gift of a great bell and lost their state. 57 The prince of Yu was obsessed with the jade disc of Chuaji and was captured. 58 Duke Xian was bewitched by the beauty of Lady Li and created chaos for 4 generations. 59 Duke Huan was besotted by the harmonious flavors of Chef Yu Yat and was not buried in a timely fashion. 60 The king of the Hu tribe was debauched by the pleasures of female musicians and so lost his best territories. 61 If these 5 princes 62 had matched their genuine responses to the situation and relinquished what they did not really need, if they had taken their inner selves as their standard and not run after external things, how could they have possibly arrived at such disasters? Thus, in archery, it is not the arrow that fails to hit the center of the target, it is the one who studies archery who does not guide the arrow. In charioteering, it is not the reins that fail to make the chariot go, it is the one who studies charioteering who does not use the reins well. 63 If you know that a fan in winter and fur clothes in summer have no use to you, then the alterations of the myriad things will be like dust in the wind to you. Thus, if you use hot water to stop something from boiling, the boiling will never stop. But if you really know its root, then all you need to do is put out the fire.